and I call the member for Hasluck.
Deputy Speaker, thank you. I rise to talk about the Veterans Affairs Legislation Amendment Bill 2012 and the Coalition's efforts to see fair indexation for the Defence Force retirement benefits and the Defence Force retirement and death benefits military superannuants aged 55 and over. At the heart of these amendments is the idea that our military veterans need to be looked after in retirement. Unlike some in the Labor Party and the Greens, the Coalition believes in the unique nature of military service. I hope that the independents will stand and be counted when the time comes to vote on this issue. Australia's service personnel, past and present, after giving so much to their nation, deserve to live out their lives in the knowledge that they have financial security. I have many previous service personnel living in my electorate, and I want to see them given a fair go. I will talk more about them later on. For now, I would like to focus on the specific of the amendments put forward. The Veterans Affairs Legislation Amendment Bill 2012 contains a number of minor technical amendments to veterans legislation. There are 9 in total. However, the number one issue of concern that the Parliament must immediately deal with is the unfair, unjust and inequitable situation facing our military superannuants. It is no longer acceptable that this Labor government continues to fiddle about the edges of policy, while at the same time wholly dismissing the everyday concerns of veterans, ex-service personnel and their families. Just six weeks ago, when many on the other side of this place rose to enjoy the winter break, military superannuants in my electorate were sent letters from the Gillard government explaining that they would be receiving just a few cents more in their pensions each fortnight, or 0.1% increase. Compare that to the rise in aged and service pensions of 0.9%. The paltry rise of 0.1% comes at a time when the carbon tax will push many prices up by 10%, according to the Treasury's modelling. Also, contrast this with the increase these people would have received from the Coalition had our 2011 legislation passed the Senate. We proposed a 9-fold increase. Yes, Deputy Speaker, a 9-fold increase in military superannuants' pensions. Now, I'd like to briefly detail the 9 alterations put forward by the Coalition, and I realise that others have done this before me and have said the same. But this is so important that the government must hear this over and over until it introduces fair indexation legislation. The time has come that those that truly value our retired Defence Force personnel to take a stand. First, the Coalition wants to clarify payment expenses for treatment of those impacted by the nuclear testing in the past. Second, we want to provide more timely provisions of services special assistance by way of a legislative instrument in place of current arrangements requiring a regulation. Third is to ensure that the debt recovery provisions will be applicable to all relevant provisions of the Veterans Entitlement Act. Fourth is to make technical amendments to the provisions in the Military Rehabilitation and Compensation Act that refer to legislative instruments. Fifth, to amend the Military Rehabilitation and Compensation Act to replace obsolete references to pharmaceutical and telephone allowances under the Military Rehabilitation and Compensation Act supplement. 6. Amendment to rationalise the maintenance income provisions of the Veterans Entitlement Act by repealing redundant definitions used in the Social Security Act. 7th is to see bereavement payments in respect to indigent veterans or members made exempt as income under a special Social Security test. 8th, an amendment will make reimbursements under the Repatriation Pharmaceutical Benefit Scheme and the Military Rehabilitation and Compensation Act Pharmaceutical Benefit Scheme exempt from income tax. 9th, change would be to make minor technical amendments to the Pharmaceutical Reimbursement Scheme. Now, these amendments are not particularly controversial. They are common sense alterations to existing legislation. However, they still need to be made. It is a travesty that under the Veterans Pharmaceutical Reimbursement Scheme, a 2007 Labor commitment which was delayed until the 2010 election campaign, that only veterans with qualifying service and in receipt of a disability pension are eligible to have their out-of-pocket expenses reimbursed. This means that approximately 1,500 of Australia's most disabled ex-service personnel who receive a disability pension but do not have qualified service are excluded from this scheme. This is blatantly unfair. The Coalition's proposal suggests all special rate or temporary permanent incapacitated veterans in receipt of a disability pension paid at or above 50% of the general rate would automatically qualify. It is often said that the most important role of the federal government is to ensure that it is defended adequately from all foes, domestic and foreign. I would like to take that concept a step further on two fronts. Firstly, it is the government's duty to ensure that the people who are prepared to stand and be counted when their country needs them or voluntarily serve in our armed forces are looked after properly on their return and in their later years. Also, how are we supposed to attract quality people to serve in our armed forces when they face a myriad of discrepancies in their retirement compared to those that have not served their country in this way? As I said earlier, Deputy Speaker, the Coalition recognises the unique nature of military service and it is fundamental that a responsibility of this nation is to protect it as it is to look after those who put themselves on the line to do it, both past, present and the Anzacs of the future. It is timely that this debate is being held, given the Vietnam Veterans Day 2012 and the 50th anniversary of the arrival of Australian troops in Vietnam. Some 520 men died on active duty in Vietnam between 1962 and 1972. This was a huge loss of life, and the impact of this is still felt today. By the end of the war, more than 58,000 Australian sons and daughters took part in the conflict that shaped a generation. When recognising Australia's contribution in Vietnam, we could never look past the Battle of Long Tan, which took place on the 18th of August 1966. For those brave 108 men of D Company 6 RAR to fight and win the day against a vastly numerically superior enemy was truly an incredible feat. It is amongst this backdrop that we must reflect on this legislation and view the treatment of our Defence Force retirement benefits and Defence Force retirement and death benefits military superannuants. Deputy Speaker, I'm lucky enough to enjoy a strong relationship with the RSLs in my electorate. In the north of Hasluck, the Bellevue RSL has a strong membership. In the hills, the Darling Range RSL continues to enjoy strong community support. And in the south, the Gosnells RSL goes from strength to strength every year. These are amazing people, people that have formed strong bonds with those that they have served with and recognise that camaraderie is as important as it was on the battlefield. Deputy Speaker, I try to be non-partisan when talking about issues such as this. Our ADF must know that they enjoy the full support of our Parliament. They must know that their contribution to the nation is valued and they are not put in harm's way lightly. They must know that we will do whatever we can as parliamentarians to honour their service and sacrifice. Earlier this year, the Leader of the Opposition, Tony Abbott, along with the Shadow Minister for Veteran Affairs, Senator Michael Ronaldson, signed a written pledge to affirm the Coalition's commitment to veterans on this occasion. The Coalition's commitment will see Defence Force retirement benefits and the Defence Force retirement and death benefits military superannuation pensions being indexed in the same manner as the aged and service pensions. Now contrast this with the actions of the Treasurer Wayne Swan. On the same day the Leader of the Opposition recommitted to providing veterans with fair indexation, the Treasurer rejected outright any such changes. Labor's commitment at the 2007 election to fix military superannuation is one of its many broken promises. The Gillard Labor government promised much to those in the veteran community but has repeatedly failed to deliver due to their own self-interest and poll-driven policy paralysis. Unlike Labor, the Coalition has consulted widely and listened carefully to the views put forward by the veterans, ex-servicemen and women, ex-service organisations and current ADF personnel. Labor has failed veterans when it comes to military superannuation reform. Labor has failed to respond to the review into the military superannuation arrangements, or the PODGER review, which they've had for over 4 years. Labor's wasteful and reckless spending in so many other areas has left them unable to meet their commitment of 2007 to prevent further erosion of veterans' pensions due to unfair indexation. Labor had no military superannuation policy at the last election, and it continues to have no policy on military superannuation reform. Labor used more paper criticising the Coalition's plan to tackle an important pressing issue in the veteran community than actually setting out the plan to tackle it themselves. Deputy Speaker, times are tough in the community for many people. A government should do all it can to make things easier, not harder for its citizens. Let me quote a small paragraph from an email that was sent to me about this very issue. It is poignant and a reminder that there are multiple sides to this tale. The government has a moral obligation to give our veterans a fair go, not just a financial one. The whole email speaks to the entire veteran community, not just those doing it tough. The author believes it is not the Australian way to ignore our comrades just because some of them might not be as impacted as others. So please indulge me, Deputy Speaker, while I quote from this email. Now, whether or not you are a Defence Force retirement benefits and a Defence Force retirement and death benefits superannuant, you should be concerned about the Senate's latest decision to negate the fairer indexation bill on the 16th of June 2011. We've always been a team, we've always stood by each other, we've always defended our mates, especially those in difficult situations. We need your help now. Those last words resonate strongly with me and those who've contacted my office about this issue. Looking after your mates doesn't stop just because you've stopped serving. The financial distress experienced by our veterans community is unacceptable. Sadly, the Labor and Greens are too caught up in ideological policies and not on alleviating some of this distress. How does wasting billions of hard-earned dollars on pie-in-the-sky schemes help our veterans or the wider community? When examining the track record, it is of concern that we have a section of our community who have fought, have stood and faced the anger and the fire in the battlefield. And what we've seen is a neglect of their contribution to the freedoms, to the moments that we enjoy on a daily basis in the way that we live within this community. And yet, those who have sacrificed their time, their efforts in defending us against the foes that are both common to our allies and ourselves are being overlooked. I cannot understand why it is that those who give so much are given so little. It is important that we look after the service personnel who serve this country to give us the freedoms that we enjoy. And I find it fascinating that Minister Snowden, who has been around to a number of veterans and organisations and RSLs, makes commitments but doesn't deliver. That many of the servicemen and women that I have met in my electorate and around in the broader community are absolutely angry at the fact that they have been ignored. I had the privilege of spending 7 days on the HMAS Melbourne, and I saw firsthand the way in which our servicemen and women gladly dedicate themselves to defending this country, to be at the forefront of conflict, to be there in times of both peace and war, but then to work to make sure that we enjoy the freedoms that each and every one of us in this country has. So it is time for us to seriously give back to them, give them the financial peace that they deserve, give them the opportunity that in their later years, after serving their country, they have financial security, that they do not have to worry about the next meal on the table or finding that they have to struggle to live each day as it evolves. I want to acknowledge every veteran within my community because I think that I owe, and all of us owe them so much for the contribution that they have made in making our society the way in which we enjoy it, so rich, so free, and the liberties that they have given us. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.